Hey guys, Tim from the Midnight here. This is a little breakdown of our song Night Skies off of our latest album, Monsters. This is the first kind of track breakdown that I've ever done. I've done a tutorial for the Comeback Kid years ago for Sonic Academy. But that was a bit of a different process because I had to kind of trace the steps back to kind of show how I got there. So this is more kind of me, kind of a bit more free flowing, loose conversation with myself, I guess. Kind of breaking down some of the elements in the tracks and kind of showing you what plugins I use and you know how I get to where I end up being at, my weird little process. I have got a session open right now, which is actually a session where it's just kind of some drums from Lost Boy, because I ended up bouncing the kick and the snare from Lost Boy, those kind of the settings, and pulling them in using them in Night Skies because I was in a rush, and so I don't have that particular setup. Like all the plugins I use on the kick and the snare drum are in a different session. I just bounce them to save some space and all that stuff. So let's just break down the kick and the snare in this session, then I'll open up the actual Night Skies sessions afterwards. Here we've got the kick. You know, pretty boring stuff. Let's see what it's going to. I'm just going to go real in depth with each sound so you can show it. This is my drum bus. All my, this is the beat. Very, very, very simple. Too simple, some would say. So I will just show you solo the kick. It's got automation on it. It's literally nothing we're using in this session. Just bypass that so it's not confusing. Here's the kick. Here's it with no plugins on it. This is actually... So this is the same kick I used on a ton of stuff. It's been sort of the kick I've sort of built over the years, and it started with Endless Summer, and then when I did Nocturnal, I took the kind of clicky area of that kick, and then I added a different low end and kind of bounced that. So it's like two kicks. One is like the lower punch, and one is the mid-tone click presence. And I bounced that as one, and then treated that as one sample. So I honestly couldn't even tell you where the low end comes from. Like it's years ago. In Kids, I used that kick, added a different low end to be a little less hard and kind of slightly warmer and softer. And so that's, again, another bounce. So I'm really sorry I can't like find those old samples and show you like, oh, this is the low end I used. And here's the, it's from some sample pack. The click is from, I don't think it's a Lindrum, but it's some synthwave sample pack from like 2015 or something like that. So, it's just sort of the kick I go to when I need kind of that nice presence in the mid. But also some nice low end information there. So right now, this is a plugin I use. I love using for low or high cutting. It's very gentle. It is from Sonalxis, I think you pronounce it, and it's just called Creative Filter. And you'll hear what it's doing. I'll bypass it so you can hear. This is it before with nothing on it, just clean. And that's with it. So as you can see, I'm literally just rolling off a bunch of highs. So this is like high cutting anything above. It's not super harsh. I could go much harsher on the slope. That's like way too much. So the slope is 12. Is set to 12. I can 12 dB, or I don't know. I'm not very techie, so forgive me if I use the wrong terms or just don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm rolling off highs because I didn't want it to be so harsh, because usually I always send my drums to one drum bus, as you can see. And right here, it's like, we'll get to that later on, but I'm using a UAD, like a tape kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Tape, I can't even speak. This is proof that I don't know what I'm talking about. tape saturation. That's the word I was looking for, and some EQ and compression and all that stuff. So usually I end up adding a bunch of high information to to kind of to my drum bus. And like controlling some lows and taking some harshness out around like 3 or 4K on the on all of the drum bus. So usually I don't want too much harshness going on in my like kind of bass samples that I'm sending to the bus. So here we go, rolling off some highs. The next one is this, which is also kind of it's like a legacy plugin within UAD. And if you don't have UAD, it's totally fine. I love UAD. It's fantastic. They're expensive, and you can only kind of. I need to upgrade my sound card because I'm just using an Apollo Twin, which is like the smallest, almost the smallest version of what you can use, and it doesn't allow you to run that many plugins at a time, especially if you're running with like their their built-in reverbs and stuff because they take a lot of processing power, but. This is not like an elitist kind of thing. Like if you don't have these expensive plugins or this special sound card, then you can't make synthwave and you can't make it sound good. I see tons of producers using really expensive stuff and they don't know how to use it. And I am one of those guys, and I was one of those guys. So I think it's important to learn the equipment you have and be able to really use it and utilize it to its fullest. And then you can upgrade. 10 years ago, if I had all the UAD stuff, it wouldn't have made my stuff sound any better because I wasn't as good at mixing. So it's come with time and lots of practice. So this is just an EQ, as you can see. This is I'm going to be copy and pasting a lot. This is just to roll off some highs. So I'm boosting. This is how you boost 5K, boosting a little bit of that, and I'm rolling off around. This is kind of the frequency it selects. So around 10K, I'm rolling off. So this is it off and then with. Very, very subtle. Like, I can't even hear the difference. I don't even know why I did it, but here we are. This one is a really cool little plugin. And oh man, see? For some reason, I used it, I tried it, and then I bypassed it, and then I forgot to actually bypass the actual plugin. So it's taking up, taking up processing power, but it's actually not being used. So I guess there's not even any point of talking about that. But what I would have done let's have a listen to what it does and why I probably put it on in the first place. So this is bypassed and without being bypassed. So it's compressing, it's controlling, it's basically a multi-band compressor. It's a great EQ, it's a free plugin. They're called Tokyo Dawn, and this one's called Nova, and I think it's the smaller, the little brother of the bigger, not free version. So this is the free version. It's great. I love it. It's a little heavy on the DSP, on the kind of CPU, but it's great. Anyway, so I am basically just compressing some low-end information. Probably what happened when working on Lost Boy or this track, I found that it just control the low end too much. So I bypassed it and then I forgot to actually just take it off. So here you can hear. It just becomes a little cold. And then without it, it's just a bit warmer, and ultimately that punch is what I need the kick for. So, let's just bypass that. And this is a great plugin. This is ultimately, it's kind of a saturation plugin. It's from UAD as well. Again, don't need, you could use another plugin that does kind of a distortion saturation, but let's hear it without it. This is our kick. And then the fatso. A lot more presence. And what I do, this is probably going to make it louder, but what I like to do is also usually before I when I'm kind of finding the sort of tweaking my sounds, I like to make sure it's at the same level. Like if you put on a compressor on something and it immediately sounds louder, you're going to go, wow, that's great. What a great plugin. But you're not actually hearing what it's doing. So I like to kind of make sure it's kind of at the same level when I bypass and when I turn it on again so I can hear what it's actually doing. So I probably turned it up later on once I liked what I heard. But let's see if we can, I don't know if it's called gain staging or something. There's probably a really fancy word for it. This is bypassed, and you can see the output. I don't know if this works if I can zoom in, but anyway, I'm zooming in. So it's right above 9 dB with it. A little louder, but not much. Let's turn it down a bit so we get the same level. Okay, so now it's bypassed. And now on. So not a huge change in level, but it sounds kind of louder and a little bit more present. And all this is doing is essentially adding some punch and some dirt and a little bit of high end as well. And I don't know the plugin super well. I know, again, if you ask me like what this is, like it's bypassing something. That's all I need to know. Sometimes, I mean, I know how like compressors and EQs work, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know what a tranny is. It's probably a transistor, some kind of thing. So it's some sort of like maybe tube distortion or something. And I know UAD usually models their stuff from other vintage. So this is some kind of vintage like emulation, and that's why I love UAD stuff. They do, I think, in my opinion, they're the ones that are doing it the best out there. It's in the higher price range, but it just sounds so damn good. So anyway, that's where we're at. That's our kick. And then we'll get to, you can hear what all this is doing. It's adding a lot more presence, but I'll do that once we've done the snare. Let's go to our snare. Very simple stuff. This is the snare drum from Explorers. So I use this snare on all of Kids, I think. Maybe except Arcade Dreams, because it's a different kit. But all the drums, Lost Boy, Explorers. America 2 is a different kit as well. Same snare, same kick, but different snare for sure. I wanted a tighter sound. This is our snare drum. It's Explorers. Let's take this off. So you recognize that. And that is essentially a kind of a little cocktail of a few drums. It's like a Simmons tom that I pitched down. And I tried out so many Simmons drum machine samples from different sound banks. And I'll just scour, like, if you go, cool, let's try a Lindrum snare. I will go through all my different Lindrums, not just different pitch, but also different sample libraries, because they all are different. They're recorded differently and at different sample rates. And, you're kind of looking for the best version of the thing to fit into your thing. So just because it's a Simmons tom, that doesn't mean it's going to sound identical, depending on where it's coming from, who bounced it, who sampled it. It's all, it could have been thrown through some kind of like saturation or some EQ, whoever was doing those sample banks. So I just kind of go for what sounds best in the vibe that I'm doing, and then I take it from there. But so this is like some kind of like low end tight snare that I remember using, and then added the tom to do the that kind of thing. But the Simmons tom in itself doesn't have a lot of punch in it. It's more like, so you want to add. So I kind of remember like rolling off some highs for that snare drum, whatever I used. Again, this is like 3 or 4 years ago. So I couldn't tell, I can't really go back and be like, here's what I used. Sorry about that. But such is the creative process. So anyway, we've got the snare. And again, rolling off some highs, tiny bit. This is kind of why I love this filter. I use it for sometimes to roll off just really high cut, like a whole channel of a bunch of stuff, and it makes it all moody and sound like underwater and kind of sexy. But I love it for simple elements. If you turn the filter to 24. And then you can literally, you'll hear it's a tiny difference, but it makes a difference. So here's this bypassed. You hear that? So it's taking out a lot of like harsh information that's ultimately going to be, there's going to be added more highs later down the line in the drum bus. So really just rolling off some highs. And again, if I was to change, I'm wrong one. If I was to change the slope, this wouldn't have as much effect. Like that's too much. So I like it keeping the slope high, kind of a little more aggressive, and then really just taking off, like rolling off the most without, you're not losing presence, but you're rolling off whatever's above the frequency. So, and every filter and EQ are going to be different. Like if I was to do this exact setting in another EQ I love, that's my go-to EQ is FabFilter's Pro Q. If I was to do, a filter slope of 24 and set it to that exact frequency, it would sound, I've tried it, it sounds way different. And so find the plugins that work for the thing you're using it for. That's all it comes down to. This is to add some punch. Essentially, this is by who makes this? This is Plugin Alliance. Transient Designer. So this is great for drums. I sometimes put it on my whole drum bus, and it's basically you can add more sustain, so you can hear the tail of things, and you can add more attack or take away attack. So let's just have a listen to this. So already you can hear it's tightening up the sound a little bit because I want the tail, but I want a bit more attack. So you could have also just done this and then added more attack. You hear that? That's a little too much. And so, see if I can get it back to paste. Here we go. This is where I had it. Just took off some of that tail, and it ultimately the result is, keeping that attack, but just controlling the tail a little bit. I find that's what I do a lot. It's sort of you're controlling the elements rather than kind of adding huge. I love plugins that don't do a ton, but it's subtle, but it all adds up to the final thing. And I've just added some. Again, this is what I'm doing. So let's say we put this in 0 right now, taking away the sustain. Maybe that took away some level, like that. You can bypass it. So with it, I guess I took some tail away, and I felt like it needed more energy, so I just turned it up a bit. Anyway, very boring information, I know. Here we go. This is fun. This is a plugin. Here we go. It's opening. This is a plugin called Tape by Softtube. This is a fantastic tape saturation. I love my tape saturation. You'll find that out. But this is a great plugin. It's on the pricier side. I think it's like $200 or something like that. But it's really good. Typically not so great on drums in my experience, but I guess I used it for this snare drum because I'm using it very subtly. This is bypassed, and here's it with it. So adding some brightness, and that's me. There's a little EQ in there, add some brightness, and you can add some saturation. You can really crank it. It's pretty subtle, but you can hear it. So you could hear I didn't change a lot of levels. I like the level, I took down the output, but it's like it's saturating it a lot more. So just some simple saturation in here, a little bit of brightness. So it's sort of like you could go, well, why are you taking away brightness in your filter and then adding it later? But it's sort of it's a different. This is not an EQ. It's sort of just adding some harmonic information rather than just turning up frequencies. And so I try to always take my first go-to in any sound is find whatever harsh frequency I don't like, and then I remove that before I even start adding stuff. So whether that's a kick drum, a snare drum, a bass, a guitar, there's always going to be frequencies that you don't like. So take them out and then start adding, before you do anything. So that's and then again, maybe I was like, oh, this is a little brighter now. So I'm probably going to roll it off if I know myself. There we go. Again, doing this again. And bypassed. So as you can hear, very subtle, but rolling off, adding some punch with this guy, and adding some saturation, just a little bit more presence, and then just rolling off what I thought was like, okay, I've got the best of those worlds, but I kind of want to dial that back a bit. And then I'm sure I put it through this guy again. Yeah, here we go, the saturator, or the fatso. It's kind of similar, I think, to, there's another one called the distressor, but I don't have that one. But that one's also cool. But it's sort of, it's at the end of the day, it's some sort of like saturation, distortion kind of thing, and you can use it really subtly or really aggressively. But it ultimately, what I love about that is it's a different way than just compression to control elements, but add character to them and add dirt or roll off highs or make something more bright or whatever. It's just a little bit less clinical than just an EQ. So let's have a listen. So this is without it, and with it. So as you can hear, it's just controlling it. It's not really doing it. So it's not going, oh, wow, now it's like, oh, crazy punchy. All that is doing is making it a little less brittle, a little warmer, a little bit more analog, and controlling it. So we'll try that again. Bypassed. And with it. So you can hear it's actually taking away some attack. So what I did then is most likely add some attack. Yeah, took away some sustain because it was basically compressing it, adding a tail, making everything a little flatter, a little bit longer. But now I'm like, cool, I've got the best of that, but now I'm missing some, it's adding the tail, but I'm missing the attack. So let's try bypassing this and hearing what it sounds like first without and then with it. So you can hear it's like controlling the tail again. Without it. And with it. So it's all kind of a lot of back and forth, but ultimately fairly different than without all the plugins. So that's still a great place to start, but I think for what I was doing, I was looking for just controlling it a little bit and adding a little bit, for it to feel a little bit less bright and brittle and kind of digital. Here we go. And it's a little on the dull side, but it's a little on the duller side, but that's fine because I'm adding all this crap now. So it's sort of, I know it feels counterintuitive to be like, well, you keep taking away and then you just add it. But it's sort of like you're taking away what you don't like, but then you find a plugin that adds a kind of a character or a frequency range or something you like that you felt it was missing. So this is now being sent to the drum bus. This is UAD again. There are a ton of tape saturation plugins, and they are all great in different ways. I love this one for my drum, especially for 80s drums that have that kind of mid-range information. In the snare is very splashy and the kick is very clicky. I like that. You also can use the UE Satin. Let me open that one up. That one is a great substitute for this guy. This one ultimately, I feel like it sounds a little richer. It's a little simpler, but it sounds slightly less brittle, and it's just a bit deeper. Like there's more information in the low end, but ultimately this guy is so great. I use it on snare drums, on basses, on the full tracks. It's fantastic. So I highly recommend that one. But this is the one I used for this drum bus. So let's bypass it. Oh, let's just hear the drums here. And we've got this little this little hi-hat playing. It's just a plugin. It's just a Zebra plugin. So very simple. Not much point in going into that. And I think we have a hi-hat going in. Let's just play that. Oh, there's a little shaker. Honestly, it's not even worth it to talk about that. Let's just listen to this drum bus. Oh, I should probably mute this. I've got some tapes hiss going on here. We'll just take that away. It's a bit much right now. Okay, so that's the drums. Now we'll add this tape saturation. So you can instantly hear there is presence, little bit of highs added because the EQ, it has this EQ you can hear without it. I kind of like it. Sometimes it's a little too bright, depending on what sounds and what the style is you're working in. But this one is just great. It adds a lot of presence. I love putting tape saturation on my on my drum bus. It just feels, it sort of glues everything together in a really nice way, because in tape saturation, there's sort of inherent compression happening, which is why it's so great. And it's been, it's not been slammed, but like we could really go aggressively. But then you're obviously you're losing some low end information. You're losing, the more you're crunching stuff, obviously, the more information you kind of lose at the end of the day. Anyway, this is great. The next one is just an EQ. It's from Waves. I don't use this one that much anymore. It's kind of a vintage EQ. I think it's modeled on some kind of old EQ, and it's nice. It's fine. It's fine. It's something I just used since the Endless Summer days, and I kind of just pull up that session, and then I kind of continue to work on whatever I was working on. So that's probably why. I could probably pull another EQ in and use that one instead. But all I'm doing here is essentially removing some information around 3.8K, 4 dB, and adding, from 12 and upwards, adding 1 dB, and then added that. Because of this, it probably changed the level, so I added half a dB. So without it, and with it, so you can hear it's like taking out a little bit of that high kind of, especially this frequency here. It's just like kind of an ugly frequency that you don't really need. It adds a punchiness for sure. Like you want that information somewhere in that, the kick and the snare, of course, to cut through whatever it is you're doing. But generally, that's also what ends up being your kind of harsh and sharp frequencies down the line when you're bouncing and you're mixing and all that stuff. So that's all this is doing. Very simple stuff. Here we go. SSL. This is another UAD. This is kind of a stock UAD. I think this is the free UAD version of an SSL compressor. Again, you don't need to. There are tons of SSL emulations out there, so you could use. Waves does one and stuff. I don't think Waves one sounds quite as good, but you use any compressor. All this is doing is adding some like punch and presence. So we'll bypass it, and then you'll hear it with it. So you can see, let's see here, it's right above 6. And then with it, kind of same level. But it's adding some attack. It's kind of just snipping. It's like letting the hits of the kick and the snare come through, and then it's controlling them a little bit. So it dials it back right after it sort of hits. So I get it doesn't lose a lot of information, but I get a bit more presence out of it. And then this one was probably, so this is compressing and controlling a bunch of things. Let's bypass it, and then we can unbypass it afterwards. So this is essentially, let's see here. So here we go. I think there's some multi-band compressing happening maybe across the board. Yeah, pretty much across the board. So here, a little bit of turning up some low frequencies, but also compressing them so that they're a bit more controlled, but I get a bit more oomph out of it, I guess. Midtone, again, same thing. I'm turning it up a little bit, as you can see, but I'm also turning on the compressor for this frequency area. So it's just, all that is, it's subtle, but it's just controlling it a little bit while adding. And you could say, well, you're turning up everything. You're kind of right. You're not wrong. But I guess the multi-band compression, every time something's being compressed, it's being, it becomes lower. So you're just kind of making up for that. So I guess this is just what I found out that I liked. And this one is just turning up some frequencies. It's not compressing anything. As you can see, the compressor's bypassed. And here we go, another one, just basically turning up some highs, pretty subtle, it's 1 dB, and then it's just also controlling that area just a little bit. And then tiny bit of making up for the gain loss. So very simple. So this is what I did for this is the drums in Night Skies, and I probably have a different chain on the actual Night Skies session. So it would probably be I would have bounced the elements individually, the kick like this, and then the snare, and then I pulled in the other MIDI elements. So that was that. We're gonna go into the actual Night Skies session. Let's see if we can open that with no issues. Here we go. All right, so here we got, this was like the long, boring stuff. I know it's a little, I get lugubrious. So as you can see, instantly, this is the bus I've got for Night Skies. So I guess it wasn't really, that's a lot of the same stuff, but I added this one is a favorite of mine lately, Beatformer. It's pretty cheap, and it's you gotta watch out how much you use of it, because it's very effective, like it's very aggressive, but it's really cool for what it can do, but we'll get to that. So here's the drums. So bypass all that stuff. Let's just make sure that we don't have anything on the master bus that's being... So here we go, Lost Boy kick. I just bounced it like that. That's what I just went through with you guys. Simple, simple, simple. Now we go to the drum bus. Probably kind of the same settings, a little bit of saturation, turning down that input or the output. Same, this is all what I just showed you guys. This one is doing the same thing, blah, 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 all that stuff. Maybe I tweaked it a little bit to fit into the track as I was working on it. This one is called Beatformer. Let's just put it on put this on here. Okay, so bypassed. And with it, it's kind of I can't remember what it cost, but it wasn't crazy expensive. And I think I might have gotten it on sale, a year ago or something. And what it does, it adds, you can add punch. Have a listen to this. Really aggressively like controls and add punch. But the thing about the punch knob is that when you press play or when you stop the track, or if the drums aren't playing, it'll somehow bring up a ton of background noise that you have, and sometimes you need to add a noise gate after that. So that's a bit funny. But I'm just adding a bit of punch and adding some air. So this is basically what it does. I'll show you. Oh, wait. Am I? Yeah, it should be. Here we go. Now we're on. So it's kind of like, it's just adding high frequencies. And this is where the split is. It's sort of anything above, as I understand it, anything above 6K, it's turning up that, and you can choose where you want that area to be. So that's all it's doing. Let's get to like the rest of the sounds. This is a fairly, those of you that have heard the track, fairly simple track. I should have Tyler's vocals in there. We should load them. Here we go. Vocal synth. There we go. This is a fairly, probably the simplest track on the album, because it kind of cruises along. There's no big drop or whatever. It's kind of just a vibe and a mood. But there's the quote unquote chorus is just this. And yes, I did steal from myself with the little shadows nod, which was very intentional. But anyway, that was neither here, neither there. Neither there. I can't even speak. Okay, so few sounds. I'm just gonna go through them. It's really loose. This one is the old. I call it synth swell, and I think this was like just a sample. I think I had that. It was kind of a setting in a. It was like a preset in some kind of synth, and I used it a lot in Nocturnal, and I just had it as a little bounce. I used it in Lost and Found. It's in there. It's in Nighthawks. I tend to reuse a lot of this. Oh, there we go. Nighthawks, Dark Synth. That's another one. This guy, which is a couple of synths bounced in Nighthawks. I just went into the Nighthawk sessions and kind of bounced, those two as one sample and pulled it in, and then I can, pitch it up and down as I want for whatever track. So I tend to do that. It's just easier sometimes. And so I add some tape hiss since Kids and for Monsters as well. I've been adding tape hiss from whatever this is from, like Splice somewhere or whatever, but basically just this, very subtle. And it's just because I like, especially with Kids, I was trying to add a bit more of a kind of vintage, tape experience of like how it was. You put in, you press play, and then you instantly hear that hiss, and you're like, oh shit, here we go. I know something's coming. And for me, it's almost like watching a movie and you see lens flares, or you see the film grain from older movies that aren't shot on digital. I like to be reminded that I'm watching a movie. Like, that's fair. That's fine. I like that. I don't need to see true life reflected. I like that I am now watching a presented piece of entertainment or whatever. So for me, this is the equivalent. I want you to feel that this was a recording. This was something captured, a moment or a mood. And so that's kind of the intention behind that. Anyway, and then I've got the bass is this plugin. I haven't used this a lot, but I used it for the bass on Nighthawks, and I used it on Kids Reprise, and the little shorter version of Kids as well. And it's essentially just a rolling bass. Let's have a listen. And you can see it opens up a bit. Kind of very Blade Runner-y. It's nice. I love Yui. They're just great. They're fantastic, and I love all of their products. I've got a bunch of synths from them, but I haven't used this synth a lot, so I don't really know much about it. It's not my go-to, but it's nice for that kind of warm presence. That's kind of what I did. And let's see. I'm just using the built-in arpeggiator because I don't think I knew how to do an arpeggiator in the actual Tyrell synth. What is this? Let's have a look. This one is great. RC20 Retro Color, I think it's called. What is this doing? Let's have a listen. I don't know if anything is... Yeah, there's no automation with that. This plugin is just opening a filter in the actual synth. Let's have a listen. So you can hear it's adding a lot of like fatness. And sometimes I'm a little weary about like all this, muddiness, but also there's nothing else going on in that area in this track. All there is a kick. And and now I'm sidechaining that gently, probably. I'm sidechaining the bass a little bit to the kick. But so that's fine. And it just adds some crunch. This is great. This is essentially kind of a module to make stuff sound super vintage. You can make it sound like an old, like a cheap speaker, like it's coming out of a mall speaker or underwater, or digital crunch. It's really, really cool. So so it's adding some wobble. I guess it's just a little like if we turn that up, we can hear it. Let's have the mix. Where's the mix? So you can hear it's doing a bunch of stuff. So it's basically a soft just a soft vibration, super subtle, but it's sort of, I like doing that sometimes to just like add a little bit of life to something that's ultimately just really digital. And then this, adding some crunch, some sort of distortion. There's different types of distortion within this one. I like it. It's, I think there's like two type distortion and saturation, and there's different types. So whatever I chose this one. So it's much louder now. I'm low cutting a little bit in the built-in EQ. We could bypass that. So it's sort of this mode rather than just rolling it off. This is kind of adding some high, some frequencies, but it's low cutting it right below there. So it has a bit more of a kind of a Q band is a little sharper, and then just rolling off some highs gently, and then adding some highs again. I guess Let's try this. Can you do this? So it's kind of just taking out some lows and adding some highs. So I guess that was like a little final tweak I was doing. So here we go. And then I just have, most of the time I'll add, this is just Logic's built-in compressor. I use that one. Sometimes I use FabFilter's one for sidechain. And it probably is sidechain to the kick just a tiny bit. This is without it. And with it. So pretty subtle. It's not, I like doing that. Like I use sidechaining a lot as a mixing technique, even though I don't want it to sound sidechained necessarily. It's more a way of making, basically you can bring up everything a little louder in the mix and still have the kick kind of punch through nicely. Without if you took all the sidechaining off, and it all sort of adds up, it compounds, like using a little bit of sidechain on this one, a little bit of sidechain on let's say the next synth we're going to look at. I call it the collateral synth. It's essentially the synth I used there. There's a bit of compression on that one too, and everything. There's not a ton going on in this track, as you know, but everything if you would bypass that subtle sidechain on 5 or 6 or 8 sounds, then suddenly the mix just doesn't feel quite as punchy and it doesn't feel quite as present. So it's a nice subtle way of just making everything feel a little bit more in your face. And so let's go to this synth. This is the collateral synth. This is another favorite for anyone making vintage type sounds, synthwave, soul, whatever, R&B, dystopian, retro, whatever it is you're into. This one is great. It's Tal LX. It's only like $50. It's great, and it sounds so great, and I use it a ton. It's great for basses. I love that I don't have to control the information so much. Like I use a bass in this for collateral. That's a Tal bass, and I don't even think I had an EQ rolling off low end or controlling it or a compressor. It was literally just a bit of EQ to add some highs, and that was kind of it. So it's really nice. So this is the sound, how it does sound. Let's just maybe have it open up here. We can hear what it's doing. And you can see it's going to open up. It's going to open up some filters now. Let's just do this. You can hear. I think this was collateral, essentially. So I pulled in that sound. I was trying to go for a type of collateral kind of vibe, and that kind of very sort of solitude, cruising down the streets at night, just with your with your thoughts and your heartbreak. And so this is this has two choruses built in. I forget. This is I think it's the Juno 106 synth that it's just like emulating, and it is. I mean, everyone uses one, so you probably already know it, but it's great. It has different chorus modules within it. This one is a bit faster. I like that one. It's a little gentler. You can do both, which I think that makes it a little too busy. So that's, really, really simple stuff. You'll hear now this is a Waves compressor. It's an emulation of an old vintage compressor. And that one is basically all you're doing. I know I keep pressing copy and then paste. Don't mind me. I'm OCD with that stuff, but it's just habit. And I like to, whenever I make tweaks, I can just go paste. If I messed up something, paste, we're back to normal. So that's why it's force of habit. So anyway, this is controlling just, I like to put it, whenever I'm opening and closing filters on a synth or any sound, I like to put a compressor after that so that I can, sometimes if you close a synth or close a filter and really cut off a lot of information, then you're losing level as well. So if you put a compressor after that, it's going to, when it gets loud, it's going to control a little bit. And so that means it won't change drastically in level. But also what this does, you hear it, it sort of just smooths out the sound a bit before I even get to EQ. I tend to do EQ after my compressors, and you can do it however you like it. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way, but that works for me. I think that's what sounds best in most cases. So this is without it. And with it. So obviously it's changing the levels a little lower with the compressor. But what it's doing is, I love that it seems like it's also just controlling the low ends a little bit, like those kind of mid frequencies, the low mid frequencies. And it's really smooth and nice. And then I've got the old trusty, this is back when I was using FabFilter Pro Q2. Now I have the 3, but they're, I guess it's just a new version of the same one. Maybe it sounds better. I don't know. But I love, this is like my favorite EQ. This is like my go-to for everything. It's fantastic. And it's so easy to use. And you can be super gentle and kind of smooth with it, but you can also be super surgical and really go hone in on like one specific frequency and completely remove it. I love how like aggressive it can be, but also how gentle and kind of all-round smooth it sounds. So taking out some low ends, let's hear it without it. And with it. So don't need anything that's going on here. The bass is covering that. I want this to cover the kind of mids and be really warm. So I love, people go, oh, it's cheating if you can see the frequencies. Do not care. I'm trying to get some work done here. And sometimes it's fine. I can listen to what I want and I'll find the frequency. But if it shows me, then I can go, oh, maybe it's around here. Yeah, it's right around there. Don't like this. It's a great frequency, but it's ultimately conflicting with the bass. So here we go. Just removing some of the kind of boxy, like the woo, that kind of area, because ultimately that's where I want this bass to be. It's already like that's filling up the whole area, and then I'm adding microshift, which is what do they call, Sound Toys. It's kind of a chorus type thing, I guess. It's detuning and it's delaying, so that is kind of like a chorus. I know it's not technically specifically chorus, but it's doubling up your signal. So without it and with it, without it and with it. So you can hear it's subtle, but it's spreading the signal. So it's just adding kind of a wider effect, which I love on anything I do. It's I have to tone it down. Actually, I have to like curb myself and make sure that, okay, let this the one thing be in mono, because otherwise I just add Dopplers and spreaders and chorus effects on everything. But anyway, if we really turn the mix up, we can hear what it's doing. So this is just purely the wet effect. But so I'm just adding some whiteness. This one is another EQ I got a few years ago. I love this one. It's not great for like super surgical honing in on frequencies you want to get rid of, but it's great. It's very smooth and like velvety for adding, frequencies or just taking out, roughly, let's say something around between 100 and 300 hertz. You're just it just sounds really good. Without it, or let's do this actually. And with it. So you can see I'm being fairly aggressive, not doing anything in the low end here. I'm basically just taking out, as you can see, it's almost 5 dB of around 250 hertz. So, and then not doing anything else. I'm seeing, I didn't add anything here. I probably could have, but I didn't. But that one's great. The Hoser. I think it's an emulation of an old EQ, and I really like that one. It's great for anything really. Again, sidechaining that. Let's have a listen to this. If we solo it without sidechain. And with. See, I can't even hear a difference. Oh, wait, it's because it's soloed. I think I soloed. Here we go. Or maybe it's just not very aggressive. You know what? Maybe there's no kick. That's why. There we go. That's because there was no sidechain kick playing there. There we go. Here we go. So, it's not super aggressive, but it's there. But what I love is, or what I do a lot, again, to do for the mix, without wanting a super sidechain sound, I don't want it to kind of breathe, like, I want it to just dip quickly and come up really fast. So that just makes a little bit of room for the kick and the snare. And so the release is pretty fast. Tack is super fast. And so it's not staying down. It's not dipping and then keeping it down for like a longer period of time. It's just dipping it quickly. We could even try to play. Let's see what else is being played. This is sidechained, obviously. And that's just a plugin. I use this one a lot for quick sidechaining. Nicky Romero's Kick, or is it called Kickstart? Let's see what it sounds like, because these are the two only synths in there. Let's just do this. Let's try, just for shits and giggles, like bypassing these guys and seeing, how can we do this? Okay, so this is without sidechain, and then we'll just add the sidechain quickly. And seeing, it's probably going to be subtle, but hopefully there should be a difference. So without it, with it. So you can hear it sort of just makes the drums come alive a little bit. So it's just making a little bit of room for those, little punchy elements. And then the last element in that is I'm sending this to a reverb. Solo this guy. And then send it to this reverb. Which is actually Echo Boy from Soundtoys. I use that for reverbs too. I guess I have a little preset called Dream Verb. So We can solo that. So just kind of makes it a little creamier. You know, if we mute it. But with it. So all it's doing is you know, it's just gently spreading it and making it a little wider and dreamier, and especially when that, you know, if we bypass the filter automation, I love the sound of when the filter opens and then closes again, and you hear the resonating frequencies from the open in, you know, kind of resonate in the reverb, so you can hear it. You can hear the tail of that, like, I kind of love that stuff, but let me sure I keep it where I had it. So this is where we're at. And as I said, this was earlier, this is just a little like hi-hat preset I found in Zebra. Zebra 2 is a fantastic synth. I use it for so many different things, but I don't know how it works. Like, I don't quite understand it. Like, I get that this is a sound and all that stuff, but I just don't know. Like, it's so in depth that I am so not a techie person. I don't know what this. I don't know. So I stick to presets, and then I can like change, you know, add effects within the synth or whatnot. But anyway, let's move on before I get too long-winded. What do we got here? This is a sound I used in Lost Boy. You know, it's a nice little pluck. Pull that in, and it sounds like this. So that's the Shadows nod. Bit of EQ. I'm most likely, like, usually I'll just low cut stuff pretty much on anything unless I want or need that information. But this is a strictly, you know, in this area. So it's like, it's just I guess like making precautions or taking precautions. What do we have here? That's the actual Shadows synth. I think it's called that. Yeah, here we go. Pad Shadows. So this is the one I used in Shadows. So that's Spire, another synth I really like. It's definitely in the more kind of electronic, kind of EDM-y world. Little sonically, I liken it to Serum, but I think Serum can do more stuff. It's a little bit more versatile. You can go more lo-fi and stuff, where Spire feels kind of high definition. And it's great quality. I love it. It's great. But it doesn't sound vintagey, but it sounds very crisp and like very present in that high end. And the reverb is good. Like the built-in reverb, the effects are really good inside the plugin. And it just has, again, low cutting that. Honestly, really basic stuff. What else do we? Oh yeah, this one here. I called this one Bloodsport Bells or Romance. I think I just reminded me on a sound it reminded me of a sound in the Bloodsport soundtrack when I was going through sounds or whatever, and I was like, oh, this feels really good. It just kind of reminds me of some scenes where it's like Jean-Claude Van Damme is like really thoughtful and has lost his friend or whatever, and that's why I named it that. That's kind of my weird process. But those are just bells. This is another compressor that's great. I don't use it a lot. I used it a few years ago a lot, so I still have it. But from Sonalxis, the ones that also make that filter I used earlier. You know, it's just kind of controlling the sound a little bit. Nothing crazy. Low cut. Again, obviously, this is bells. Like, what are we gonna? There's no intro here that I want. And probably was a little resonant. And again, this EQ is great for like really finding the resonant frequencies. That's the sound. Let's say you go like, this is the frequency we don't like. You can make it really sharp, or you can go notch and really just take it out. Like now it's gone. So I just found the thing that was a little too resonancy and, you know, controlled it a bit. That's all it was. I don't know how much I'm running low on battery on my headphones. I might have to break this video up in 2 parts, but we'll see how far we can get. Let's go to Tyler's vocal. I don't know what I've got here. This is basically him. He recorded this really rough because he wasn't worried about pitch. It was really about delivery. So he kind of approached this as a blues song, which is what's so interesting about our process, is that he's coming at it from a completely different place. And so he recorded this, and I threw it through a vocoder. But this is how the rough, his just rough take, because we weren't worried about like pitch and getting the. It was more like, how's your punch of the words? Can I hear the words? And the delivery, your pocket, your timing. So it was all this about. And then there's a bit of compression, bit of cheap EQ, a little bit of a de-esser and compression. And I think I put in some saturation. All this was to mute it and then throw it through a vocoder. So this is how it
Your
sounds.
house is on fire, won't you let me in?
Do this.
Your house is on fire, won't you let me in? Your house is on fire, won't you let me in?
And obviously, Tyler's not worried about pitch and anything, so I keep repeating that just so you all don't go like, wow, Tyler can't even sing in tune. Yes, he can, obviously. But this was like, I was like, don't worry about that. I want just really like, I want to hear every word. So just kind of exaggerate that now that we know that you're singing to be thrown through a vocoder. And I love Tyler's so always down for that. He's like, take my voice, mess around with it, fuck around with it, destroy it. And he's never precious about that stuff, which is always fun and really freeing. And he's a little ahead on the pocket here because I pulled back the timing, because when you throw it through the for whatever reason, I don't quite know why, but when you throw it through the vocoder, this vocal synth that I love from Isotope, it kind of delays it a bit. So I always have to take the original take and move it back a bit. So let's solo it. This is just a fantastic vocoder. I use it on so much stuff. It's the one I used on America Online. I combined that with another little kind of vocoder-y effect that I use on Nighthawks, and I forget which plugin that is. But anyway, this for this track, I just used the vocal synth. It's whatever setting I found, then I tweaked it.
Your house is on fire, won't you let me in? Your house is on fire, won't you let me in? I'm drowning in desire, your hair, your skin. The flames burn hotter the deeper you go in. Your house is on fire.
It was just to kind of show you guys the colors and the chord progressions I gravitate towards, or the kind of harmonizing. So it's I'm not trying to do one note at a time. This is like, I look at this as a pad, as a kind of an instrument. So this is essentially another synth. It just happens to have words. And so I love this is my favorite chord right there. I love clashing notes that are really close and create tension. And so generally that's my kind of go-to. I don't know how many voicings I've got going on this guy. 8, yeah. So I could play like, this would be my, can I play? Oh, it's soloed. That's a midnight chord right there. Oh my God, I'm giving away all my secrets. This is literally all I have to show for. Everyone's like, oh, really? This is all you had? This is really all you had, Timothy? Let's solve this guy again. Yeah, I love this. Big shout out to Isotope. This vocal synth, this vocoder, it does a ton of things I haven't even explored. Like it has, you can make it sound like an alien, and it's crazy. And I love that it has different types of vocoders built into it. And then you can tweak, and you can, you can solo. You can use just one element or whatnot. Let's see if we can just make it a little closer.
Your house is on fire.
That's one.
Your house is on fire.
That's another one.
Your house is on fire.
That's like the main guy, I think,
Your house is on fire.
And then this one. Wait, there you go. Is it playing? Oh, I guess it's not doing anything because it's freaking turned down.
Your house is...
So that should just be turned off. We should just do this. But all of that combined is this.
Your house is on fire. Won't you let me in? Your...
And it has a little bit of distortion in there. We can bypass that.
Your house is on fire. Won't you let me in? Your house is on fire.
You can hear it's doing a lot more. Chorus.
Your house is on fire. Won't you let me in? Your...
Just needed to spread that, and I love when effects are built into a synth or a plugin, so that the closer you can get to your final sound when it leaves that plugin, the less I need to put on, additionally put on of other plugins, and it just it drains, it takes out less CPU, but I love that it's just more controlled, and sometimes, like the chorus effect or the distortion effect it might be a bit more brittle, or not quite as clean or amazing or expensive sounding within a given plugin as if you were to have like a really expensive UAD chorus. But it's more about kind of getting closer to your final sound and just subtly adding some stuff so that when it leaves, what you have in coming out of that plugin is already sounding really nice and present, I think is the word. Some filter, I think it's rolling off some highs maybe. Let's have a listen.
Your house is on fire. Won't you let me in? Your house is on fire. Won't you let me in? I'm drowning in desire.
That's another example of I've become a really big fan in the last few years, especially since making kids. It was a very intentional effort to roll off highs on a lot of stuff, and I do that still. And this is a good example of, my initial approach used to always be, I want it bright and like really present and stuff, and really all you're doing is like getting a lot of like 10K action, which is not presence. It's just, it can be harsh or brittle or bright, and it's all competing in that area. So I tend to roll off stuff unless I want something to really shine. So it's made it a lot easier for me to mix in my vocals in tracks. A good example of that is 17. I was rolling off a ton of information on the drums, on the synths, on pretty much everything other than the thing I wanted to feature. In this case, it was Tyler's lead vocal. I wanted to really feel like everything else was sort of underwater, especially in the verses. And, the guitar solo, making that nice and clean and present, but taking out the harsh frequencies. So this is rolling off highs, but it's adding a ton of mids. That's like, yeah, that's the meat. That's what I want. So without it,
Your house is on fire.
I'm with it.
Won't you let me in?
and it's turning it up a bit, but I don't mind. I don't know what this one is doing. Ring mod? No, it's not doing anything. And then probably just a de-esser to control the S's.
Your house is on fire. Won't you let me in? Your house is on fire. Won't you?
The house is on fire, all that stuff. Just controlling it a bit so that I can probably then compress it. Here we go, another
Your
compressor.
house is on fire. Won't...
Really basic, just keeping it, adding some presence, and then taking away, low end stuff, and then adding some mids and taking away a little bit of whatever harshness was going on there. Let's have a listen without it.
Your Your house is on fire, won't
With it.
you let me in? Your
So again, that's like a sharpness that I didn't want.
fire, won't you let me in?
That's the money right there. You want that.
Your house is on fire, won't you let me in? Your
That's what's going to cut through all the kind of warmness and all the stuff. So, and then this, you know, whatever was going down there.
house is on
Don't need that information. Really basic. I'm going to cut this into 2 videos because I think I need to recharge my Bluetooth headphones because I'm really fancy, guys. I'm pretty fancy. I have a Bluetooth headphones that need recharging. So, you know, living my best life. This is fun. I hope it's fun for you guys. I know I tend to get super long-winded, but that's kind of also the point of this. That you get to go in depth. And I know a bunch of people in the last few years have asked for more, you know, tutorials and stuff. And I finally have a bit more headspace and mental bandwidth, and also have gotten it set up so I can do that, and without it being a big kind of project. It's a lot easier to just open a track and talking about it versus doing an actual tutorial, because you have to trace all your steps, and that is just insanely time consuming. So I'll probably do more of these, but let's take a break, and I'll be back with the next half of the track in the next video. See ya. Bye.